My name is Steve Zeltzer, and I'm with United Public Workers for Action. And this press conference has been called around health and safety issue for the people of San Francisco, the people of California, the people of the United States. This location that we're at right here is a charter school, Life Learning Academy charter school. And there are laws in California that have been passed, including Proposition 39, that prevent charter schools from being covered under the Field Act. Which requires that schools, public schools in California, not be built on dangerous, toxic dump sites. It was passed to protect the children and the students and the staff throughout California. Well, lo and behold, Prop 39 was passed, which included an exemption of the Field Act in California, so that schools could be built on, charter schools could be built on toxic dump sites without any kind of oversight for the children, for the safety of the children and the families. This is a Superfund contaminated dump site. And the children here, the students, the young people were brought here, and they do need a place to go. These young people are homeless, some of them. They have difficult family situations. They do need a space where they can thrive and become educated and contribute to society. And we believe that that space should not be, however, on Treasure Island. So what is Treasure Island? Treasure Island was a site for the Navy after the Second World War for training Navy personnel on how to deal with nuclear contamination. There was a ship here called the Pandemonium here on Treasure Island. Pandemonium. The reason it was a fake ship, it was a stationary ship, and the reason they called it the Pandemonium is because it was a training place for naval personnel in case of a nuclear blast. So as a result of that, this island has been severely contaminated by the Navy over dozens of years. Navy personnel were contaminated. There's a cancer epidemic here. Many of the residents have gotten cancer and sick, and they have died. There are housing here that are built on radioactive dump, and the residents have not been told of the dangers, the health and safety dangers. Now, why is that? Why haven't the residents here, the workers and the people, been informed of the serious dangers here at Hunters Point? The reason is because of that view right there. It's a great view of San Francisco, and you can have million-dollar condos built here with a great view. So what we're talking about is greed. That's the reason this project is going forward. That's why millions of dollars, billions of dollars are going to be developed for construction. Now, all this construction that's going on right here is creating dust. Do you see any OSHA representatives? OSHA or EPA here protecting the residents? They're nowhere to be found. One of the reasons is when this land was transferred by Mayor Willie Brown to become a special site, it's not covered under the laws of San Francisco. It's a special district. So they don't have to comply with the laws in San Francisco as far as rent control and other laws. And we're saying that that was purposely done to allow unregulated development of this island, which is a threat to the health and safety of people. Now, the other issue we're raising here is the San Francisco School Board, because the San Francisco School Board approved this charter school to be built here at Treasure Island. And what we believe, and we call the school board to, why are they not supervising the health and safety of the students here? There's construction going on, there's dust here. Where's the San Francisco Unified School District? Where is Stephen Cook, the chair the president of the San Francisco School Board? Where's Vincent Matthews, the superintendent? They should be out here making sure that these students are protected here at this charter school. They're nowhere to be found. And we believe that that's another example of systemic corruption going on in the city and county of San Francisco, and over $1 billion is spent by the U.S. government through Nancy Pelosi and the Congress to remediate and test Treasure Island and Hunters Point Shipyard. $1 billion. And what we've discovered, what everyone has discovered, is that the tests were falsified. That in fact, now the Tetra Tech and Test America falsified the test, and Tetra America, 2 executives are in prison, federal prison, as a result of falsifying the test. Now, what we have to ask is, if that's the case, why would Governor Newsom give a $200 million contract to Tetra Tech to clean up in the campfire? Don't you think, as a result of their falsification of testing here, that they would not have more money to a company that falsified tests? basically committed fraud on the American people. That's another issue we're raising. So what we're demanding here today is that this school be shut down. We're demanding an investigation of how this was allowed in San Francisco, why the Department of Public Health, why the San Francisco Unified School District, why Governor Newsom is allowing the school to get public funding. And we're saying that there has to be an independent investigation. We don't believe that the city officials of San Francisco are capable of having an independent investigation of what's going on here because they're personally implicated. We also don't believe that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who's the former mayor of San Francisco, can be relied upon to have an independent investigation. His Department of Toxics and Pesticides actually is in charge of making sure that this place is cleaned up. Yet they continue to find radioactive material here, which has not been cleaned up. They're still going ahead with the construction. The billion-dollar plan to build condos that is going forward here today, this billion-dollar plan apparently is unregulated and there's no oversight of it. So these people are not going to be told that this is a contaminated radioactive nuclear dump site. We think that that is improper, it's a crime, and we have to call a halt to it. To the children of Flint, to the children of Newark, why do we have this right here in San Francisco, where children, students are being contaminated with lead paint in addition to the radioactive material? Again, one of the people that we want to talk about today is Amy Brownell, who is with the Department of Public Health and environmental engineer with the City and County of San Francisco. She is being paid, although she's a city employee, she's being paid for by Lennar, the developer. Now, how could it be that an environmental engineer for the City and County of San Francisco is paid for by Lennar, the developer of this project? Lennar is a developer of this project. And the reason is that Lennar cut a deal with the city that they would be in charge of health and safety, and that Amy Brownell, who really is being paid by them, would be involved in protecting the city of San Francisco and the citizens. Amy Brownell has actually been involved in selling the houses, telling potential buyers in Hunters Point that the housing was safe, that the condos were safe. So she's actually been involved in a criminal conspiracy to tell people that everything's safe when she knows, as a matter of fact, it's not safe. And she continually tells the people that things are safe. So our next speaker is a longtime activist and leader in fighting environmental racism and fighting to protect the people in the community of Hunters Point and Treasure Island and the City of County of San Francisco, Francisco da Costa. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here. Now you see the sign over here, it says stop, think, and decide. So I've been in the trenches for 40 years regarding Treasure Island and Hunters Point Shipyard. Now we have the precautionary principle, and the precautionary principle tells us that if we see anything that adversely impacts life, we have to stop and do the right thing. So you've heard the speakers say again and again that the City and County of San Francisco does not care about our infants, our children, our youth, our young adults, our beloved seniors, those with compromised health, and especially are mentally and physically challenged. Now, what the layman doesn't understand is that depleted uranium was tested on Hunters Point. And when the ships, the warships would dock over here, an order would be given to the sailors. The word used was jettison. They took the stuff, very contaminated stuff, and dumped all over this base. And the same thing they did on Hunters Point. Ships were brought from the Bikini Island, tested, and sandblasted, radiated animals from those experiments at Bikini Island, were buried all over Hunters Point shipyard. So, what do we have here? We are fighting corruption. Now, Hunters Point was put on the Superfund site, but the money is not there. The money was spent a long time ago. So right now, even as we say what we have to say, and we know what Tetra Tech has done, and we know what IT has done, and some other companies that were paid millions of dollars have done, we know that Hunters Point is contaminated. But right now, we are here on Treasure Island, and what we see is right here, you see trucks grading, and very little water is put. If you paid attention, you saw the Muni bus go up and down. And this place is contaminated. What does that mean? There are all sorts of particles, PM 2.5, other type of contaminants that bus takes to the city. And all the people who use the bus, and even we here, we all should have been standing here with a mask, because it affects everybody depending on how healthy they are. So I'm encouraging politicians, leaders who have their heart in the right place, who are educated on issues. And I believe every single day that when I pray spiritually, you have to be very strong. So I'm the director of Environmental Justice Advocacy, but I also represent the first people of San Francisco, the Muwakma www.muwakma.org. And you can learn a lot about the first people, and you can also learn a lot about the history of what is happening. So the first people were here for 15,000 years, carbon dated. But here on Treasure Island, and this hasn't been spoken in detail, it's a man-made island. The hills at Potrero Hill were carved out and all that dirt was brought and this island was created. Now I worked for the Presidio of San Francisco. I was 6th Army's last congressional liaison. And then after that I created the infrastructure group, the maintenance technical support group. And with Charles Swanson, who was an engineer, he worked for the Corps of Engineers, we monitored every square inch of this blessed island. And I don't want to go into too much detail. It's sinking 1.5 inches every year, and the infrastructure is pathetic. Everything on this island is pathetic, but they want to build a brand new treatment plant, sewage treatment plant. They are negotiating to bring power. But most importantly, what they're going to do over here is build market rate housing and push the people away. The people who are brought here, and a lot of them are already suffering from cancer. We have many cases of people who are suffering from cancer. We have met them, we have protested outside 450 Golden Gate. And we used to have astute leaders, very knowledgeable. Bobby knows about me. Although some of y'all who are here know about me. I'm an action man. I don't like to talk too much. So I go to City Hall, I check those guys out, and I write about their assets. I keep it real. And I'm not afraid of them because I have higher clearance than the chief of police. So they go to the FBI and they check me out and they say, oh, we can't do anything. You can't do anything to me because I am doing right. I don't take one single dollar from the city. I have to fight for the people, the poor people. Because even the great master said, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So this is Francisco de Costa. I'm not afraid of any of these guys. And I know a lot about London Breed. I know a lot about Willie Brown. I was personally talking to the last 13 police chiefs, right as I'm talking to y'all. Because, as has been mentioned, this city is the most corrupt city in the nation. Be it that we have had Democrats. All these Democrats, some names have been mentioned, all of them are corrupt. And this is my subjective opinion. If the Democrats had done right, we would not have the mess that we have in the White House. We have a buffoon in the White House. Do you know what the buffoon has done? All these things, when you say environmental justice advocacy, and you say the Bay Area Quality Management District, the Department of Toxics and Substances Control, all of them do not get funding. They don't get funding. We went from San Francisco to North Dakota to fight for the Native Americans. And those guys saw me and they said, Francisco, what are you doing here? And I asked them, what are you doing here? And let me talk to the troops. And the troops know me. And I told them, these are my people. You've got to do right. See, these guys saw us taking photographs, so now they're pretending to clean the street and pour some water. But my thing is this. Each one of y'all who's gathered here, you have to take this serious. And you can take it serious by writing about it, by speaking about it. And I would like the organizers of this meeting to have a meeting somewhere at the public library or somewhere so that like-minded people can understand what really is happening to our city. Our city is saturated with corruption. All the Sunshine Task Force, the Ethics Commission, nothing works. The district attorney's office doesn't work. The poor guy there did nothing. The city attorney in 2014, there was a law case. He does nothing. I can go deep into it. I have a blog. So, we need to stand united. We need to be educated on issues. Our heart has to be in the right place.
Okay, let's get a picture here of this sweeper here walking down the path. So our next speaker is a longtime activist and an artist, and he is running for school board. His name is Bobby Coleman, and he's here to address some of these issues. So welcome, Bobby Coleman.
I'm also an attorney since 1981. I've been very active on environmental issues, public interest issues of all types, including housing for many years at the San Francisco Tenants Union. I also have one of the top management credentials in the world, an MBA from the Stanford University Graduate School of Business, which I received following getting my law degree and starting law practice. I've edited books, I've worked in schools, and I came today to learn about this issue, and I'm going to be brief because none of us actually want to be here breathing what we're breathing. Members of the public and press who are here, I apologize. I didn't know how horrendous the scene would be, or I would have brought masks for everybody, including myself. When I get home, I'm going to be laundering everything I'm wearing, showering, scrubbing my shoes. Based on what I see across the street, which you can't completely capture on video, they're grading a large area with bulldozers and not doing much mitigation. And what I'm seeing here is incredible. It's not that I haven't been on Treasure Island before. I've been here, I'm going to step down a little lower for a second. I was here when former school board president and recent San Francisco supervisor Jane Kim was running in this District 6. So there are 11 supervisorial districts, and this is District 6, which also includes the Tenderloin and south of Market, and then extends out in this area. One would think it might be District 3, but it's actually District 6. And subsequent to walking with Jane Kim, shoulder to shoulder, to speak with residents of this area, those terms, and she was succeeded by the current supervisor, Matt Haney. Matt Haney also served on the school board. So here I am running for the Board of Education. The public hasn't elected me, and the public hasn't elected my opponent. My opponent was appointed by the current mayor. Now the prior speakers spoke about decades and decades of misuse of the bay and this man-made island and the pollution that's impacted poor people, immigrants, and people of color. We know this has gone on most notoriously in the Bayview, where people are suffering pollution-related ailments. And not only suffering, but dying. And we know that that's going on here too. It's not news to anybody. What's interesting to me is that in the middle of a mayor's race, in an election season, that we have to be out here asking why isn't there sufficient attention paid to mitigating these pollution issues and protecting these children. So often, city leaders and elected officials say, I'm there for the people. They say, I'm there for children first. My decision-making is for the children, for the families, for the young people. That's the political language that they've used and will use in response to our call for action. They will continue to use the language that we are for you, we're for the children, we're for the families, we're for health. You can trust us. We're doing good things here. We are supplying services and resources to people exactly where they need them. And yet, I don't believe that the errors of the past should be the errors of the future. I think that if we know that there are errors in the past, that rather than continue them, we should take a look and we should take responsible action toward remedies. Now, we're not going to get somewhere with politics as usual. I'm at a point in my life and my work where I have to come into war zones like this and potentially shorten my life and breathe these particles. That's a little worse than I expected, so I'm going to wrap up my comments and send you all home to get a good scrubbing. But I do implore all of us who hear this message to not go down the path of the past. We know that former Mayor Willie Brown and the development interests that he often has represented have wanted to build hotels and casinos, both on Alcatraz and also here on Treasure Island, and anywhere that lots of money can be made. Their argument will be development is good, and development is good for the poorer communities as well. But at what price? At what expense? And is that the best option we have? Is that really the best that San Francisco can do, is turn a polluted site into a danger zone for children? It's remarkable to me that I have to be here today to speak to this issue. And I assure everyone, it's not the last you'll hear from me on it.
So our speaker today is Joel Ventresca.
I'm Joel Ventresca, a candidate for San Francisco mayor. I'm a former City and County of San Francisco Environmental Commissioner. The U.S. military conducted 216 atmospheric and underwater nuclear weapons of mass destruction tests between July 1945 and November 1962. Many of the Pacific Ocean-based horrifying nuclear tests involved U.S. Navy ships that were heavily contaminated with dangerous radiation fallout. The Navy brought the radioactive ships from the nuclear test back to the U.S. Naval Base at Treasure Island and the U.S. Naval Base at Hunters Point. The Navy tried and failed to decontaminate the ships, but spread the radioactive materials across hundreds of acres, negatively affecting shoreline and inland areas. In addition, the Navy created more radioactive contamination by training Navy personnel with actual radioactive materials, generated nuclear waste dumps, and operated a radiological laboratory. Both heavily contaminated Navy bases in San Francisco should have been designated U.S. EPA Superfund sites targeted for costly and prolonged cleanup using federal funds. Hunters Point was designated a Superfund site in 1989, 30 years ago. Treasure Island was not, but should have been. The U.S. Naval Base at Treasure Island escaped the Superfund site designation under mysterious circumstances, as recently documented in a front-page story in the San Francisco Chronicle. Treasure Island remains contaminated with radioactive materials and other hazardous substances. A Treasure Island radioactive waste dump, which is fenced off with actual signs indicating that it is a nuclear waste dump, is right next to a low-income, subsidized housing residential neighborhood. The over 1,000 residents are mostly people of color, and 1/3 are formerly homeless individuals. Tenants are discouraged from speaking out and are threatened with evictions if they express concerns about the contamination in their neighborhood. The U.S. Naval Base at Hunters Point is still contaminated with radioactive materials and other hazardous substances as well. There are numerous fences with signage that state "do not dig into the soil" because of known contamination below. The so-called cleanup of Hunters Point has been proven to be based on fraudulent data by corrupt and dishonest contractors, with some managers sent to prison for the fraud. As the San Francisco Chronicle pointed out on February 19th of this year, quote, "The history of Treasure Island over the last 20 years is a tale of government officials assuring the public that the island is safe and then being forced to admit it is more contaminated than they realize," close quote. The same statement could be applied to the U.S. Naval Base at Hunters Point. London Breed, starting 20 years ago in 1999, was a city and county of San Francisco public official and a top aide to the executive director of the Treasure Island Development Authority. She was directly part of the failures, deceptions, and delays in getting the U.S. Naval Base at Treasure Island cleaned up. Innocent, vulnerable people are living in danger right now, right here, because of her malfeasance and corruption. For nearly half a decade, London Breed has been the #1 or the #2 most powerful politician in the city. Yet she has done nothing meaningful to get the former U.S. Naval Base at Treasure Island and the former U.S. Naval Base at Hunters Point cleaned up. And residents and nearby residents live in fear that the ongoing malfeasance and corruption will cost them their health and lives. The following groups have been negatively impacted by this malfeasance and mismanagement: individuals and families, residents that live currently on site on Treasure Island, and the land in the Bayview, formerly under the jurisdiction of the Navy, in which new homes were built and are now occupied by hundreds of people. A low-income become primarily community of color on Treasure Island with over 1,000 residents living in the midst of a radioactive contaminated neighborhood with actual signs posted stating the fact itself. Future residents if the existing mega development plans are implemented. To allow continued inaction on the part of City Hall in regards to the cleanup of Treasure Island and Hunters Point Shipyard must stop. Failure, fraud, cover-up, and delay should not be tolerated any longer. What is needed is a new direction in the mayor's office and a new mayor. If elected mayor, I will use all my power to adopt laws, regulations, policies that will make Treasure Island and the Hunters Point Shipyard neighborhoods and nearby areas safe for future generations of residents, if possible. City Hall should take the following action steps. All city and county of San Francisco Department of Public Health managers who have failed over decades to get the Hunters Point Superfund site and the Treasure Island site cleaned up by the Navy should be removed immediately. The city and county of San Francisco must do its own comprehensive testing directly of the two sites to determine how dangerous it is to residents and nearby residents. City Hall must fully fund comprehensive science-based studies on the elevated disease rate in the Bayview neighborhood and take immediate and corrective actions as needed. City Hall should establish an independent citizens review board that will properly be funded by the city and county of San Francisco government with access to legal, technical, and science experts hired and paid for by the independent board itself for both sites. There needs to be required open public hearings where all the evidence, facts, and science is honestly shared with the public. The focus, and I want to emphasize this, the focus should be on removing contamination, not burying contamination. The developer who sold new homes to the homeowners in the Bayview while misrepresenting the risk and danger on the site or near the site of the home should be forced to buy back the home at the same price it was sold at, plus pay an additional 20% of the purchase price for the fraud that was involved in the transaction. Every homeowner should be given this option as a guaranteed right. The assumption should be that the federal, state, and regional government agencies involved with the so-called cleanup process for both sites have performed poorly, inadequately, and inappropriately across the board. The process has been riddled with incomplete and inadequate work. The outcome has been failure, fraud, and mismanagement that endangered lives. Complete and comprehensive health monitoring of all current and former tenants and residents on Treasure Island, the Navy shipyard, and nearby areas needs to be conducted on an ongoing basis and funded by the city and county of San Francisco. This should include economic incentives for participants for cooperation in collecting data to determine harm to at-risk individuals and families. City and County of San Francisco funding needs to be provided for academic-oriented and comprehensive epidemiological ongoing data collection, quarterly reports and scientific studies of current and former tenants and residents of Treasure Island, the Navy shipyard, and nearby areas with results immediately released to the public. The City and County of San Francisco must conduct new, original, comprehensive, complete, accurate, credible, and transparent full radiation testing and all other relevant toxic testing of existing structures, land, shoreline, air, vegetation, soil surface, shallow and deep core soil, buried infrastructure, animals, drinking water, groundwater, and San Francisco Bay impacted areas, including bay water, shoreline plant and animal life, and all shoreline structures for the two Navy contaminated sites. The new testing should include the City and County of San Francisco hiring 3 expert, independent, and reliable labs. The same comprehensive and random specific samples will be tested by all 3 labs. Results will be posted online immediately without delay or censorship. Expert, qualified, and independent scientists who can understand, interpret, communicate, and answer all questions from all stakeholders will be hired for timely, complete, and accurate public information purposes. The city hired public information scientists will respond to all emails within 48 hours to get answers to questions out to the public as quickly as possible. City Hall must seek 100% reimbursement from the federal government for all testing costs and related expenses incurred by the City and County of San Francisco. The mega development projects must be halted from moving forward until after new assessments and new reliable testing is completed. The newly elected San Francisco District Attorney, starting in January 2020, needs to set up a special criminal prosecutor's office to investigate and prosecute all corruption and criminal conduct in the private and public sector at every level related to the decades-long failed so-called cleanup efforts on Treasure Island and Hunters Point. A comprehensive whistleblowers program needs to be set up to assist the public disclosure of essential information that will specifically provide financial reward to anyone who comes forward with any accurate, verifiable information that directly helps the real cleanup program and assists in the criminal prosecution of any bad actors in the failed so-called cleanup program. Near each site there needs to be a library with all the government documents available with no cost to any members of the public who wants access to it. There needs to be a new comprehensive review by the appropriate agencies to determine whether or not Treasure Island needs to be designated a full Superfund site under federal law. The city should not accept any new land transfers from the Navy until the City and County of San Francisco is determined independently with objective, valid, credible, indisputable evidence, facts, and science that the land is clean enough for safe and healthy residential development for individuals and families. The operational definition of cleanup from the City and County of San Francisco's perspective must mean all radioactive and toxic contamination has been removed from the sites and is in a condition that human habitation is safe for future generations of human occupants. There should be a comprehensive public education program created to inform all current residents and former residents and all individuals, families, small businesses, and large businesses in adjacent residential and commercial areas about the significance and the extent of the contamination in, on, and around the Navy lands. A separate investigation is required to see how the mismanagement of the Navy's contaminated lands may have contaminated air, land, water, public infrastructure, and other environmental systems around but outside the actual Navy lands, and how this may have impacted the health and safety of the nearby residents and employees who live or work in the area next to the Navy contaminated lands. All City and County of San Francisco offices and operations that are currently on Navy contaminated lands need to be immediately removed. The threat of eviction for all former or current residents of Treasure Island who are in government-subsidized housing must stop to encourage active participation in helping a real cleanup program move forward. No retaliation or censorship should be permitted. And I want to emphasize, and I'm almost done, all low-income tenants in subsidized housing on Treasure Island who are living in a residential neighborhood that has clearly been contaminated by radioactive materials and other hazardous substances need to be evacuated immediately off the island. This vulnerable and primarily community of color must be relocated into safe, subsidized housing elsewhere in San Francisco with the same or lower rents because of the dangerous situation they were put in by bad actors in government. In conclusion, the Navy sites within the city limits of San Francisco must be returned to the conditions that existed before the Navy recklessly and irresponsibly contaminated the sites with dangerous and long-lasting radioactive and toxic materials. The federal government, Pentagon, and Navy must be held accountable for the radioactive and toxic pollution and the mess they created.
I want to point out the buildings next to this charter school, which are old military barracks, old military buildings. You see the front of the buildings, they have highly toxic lead paint exposed right here. Now this is next to a charter school, a publicly funded charter school, and we've got buildings with lead paint right next to it. Where's the Department of Public Health? Where's the Department Department of Education. I think it has to do with racism. If this was a if there were wealthy kids here, rich kids, they wouldn't allow that situation with highly toxic lead paint. We know what lead has done to the children of Detroit, to the children of Flint, to the children of Newark. Why do we have this right here in San Francisco, where children, students are being contaminated with lead paint in addition to the radioactive material? Again, one of the people that we want to talk about today is Amy Brownell, who is with the Department of Public Health and Environmental Engineer with the City and County of San Francisco. She is being paid, although she's a city employee, she's being paid for by Lennar, the developer. Now, how could it be that an environmental engineer for the City and County of San Francisco is paid for by Lennar, the developer of this project? Lennar is a developer of this project. And the reason is that Lennar cut a deal with the city that they would be in charge of health and safety, and that Amy Brunell, who really is being paid by them, would be involved in protecting the city of San Francisco and the citizens. Amy Brunell has actually been involved in selling the houses, telling potential buyers in Hunters Point that the housing was safe, that the condos were safe. So she's actually been involved in a criminal conspiracy to tell people that everything's safe when she knows, as a matter of fact, it's not safe.